Coaches, you and I both know that coaching can be a vague and mysterious process. We don't often know what the outcomes are going to be. One of the reasons for that is that we fail to pay attention to the very early stages in building the relationship and doing it right. So in this series, what I want to do is to share with you from my experience from learning about best practice and worst practice, some of the reasons why coaches fail to set up the relationship in a way that's going to help both coach and client. Some of the reasons why clients fall by the wayside, 6 in particular, that should be anticipated from the outset and dealt with the client. How to define coachability, how to check that your potential client is actually coachable. One of the big mistakes that I hear coaches make is to do with confidentiality and setting up expectations correctly and legally to do with confidentiality. I'm going to help you with some tips about what to pay attention to when setting things up at the outset. Clear purpose, clear outcomes, so that you can actually check results and the value of what you're providing at stages further on. And finally, I want to share with you what I reckon is best practice in an engagement model for coaches. Now, none of this is compulsory. Obviously, you're a bright, intelligent person. You need to pick from what I'm going to share with you what is appropriate for you. But believe me, if you don't pay attention to this, if you think you'll get round to this later, you're doing both yourself and, more importantly, your client a serious disservice. So please pay attention to what I'm going to be sharing with you in this series. Here's the first mistake that coaches tend to make. So my number one tip is we are often so keen to win the client or to keep our client that we don't want to get into talking about difficult areas at the outset. We just hope that things will turn out okay. We hope we're going to be able to provide some value. And let me tell you, this leads to all kinds of problems further down the track. In particular, it tends to result in the coach doing too much heavy lifting. We keep responsibility for making it work. We drive the process. We keep trying to provide value and solutions and results for our client, which is the wrong kind of expectation. And if you do that from the outset, then that's quite legitimately what the client's going to be expecting further down the track. And to be honest, it's a little bit adult-child. It's not healthy, and it creates mutual dependency. Coaching should be an equal partnership, adult to adult, where both of us are looking for what may be an unknown and unique path forward in the future. We each bring something to the relationship. What that is and exactly how to go about creating that, I'm going to share with you down the course of these videos. But number one rule is it's actually the client who does the heavy lifting, and they need to go into it eyes wide open, knowing exactly what's expected, knowing that it's not always going to be, it may be a simple thing, but it's not always going to be easy. So let me share some more tips with you on how to go about setting it up in a much healthier way from the outset. Coaches, let me share with you 6 reasons why clients tend to fall by the wayside. Now, this isn't just from my own experience, this is also from the Marshall Goldsmith coaching organization, which I'm proud to be part of. And obviously that gathers the experience of many coaches in many different environments over the years, but it breaks down into 6 particular reasons, and you should be heads up aware of these, and so should your client from the outset. Number 1 is ownership. Sometimes clients are sent for coaching by HR or by their boss. They don't really know why they're there. They don't really have a stake in it. They've just told to participate. Somebody's paid for the coaching and so they've turned up. They have a lack of ownership and they're sitting back waiting to see how you perform. Now, on the other side of the coin, sometimes coaches make the same mistake by offering free cut price or highly undervalued coaching simply to get the thing started. If the client has no ownership, you're really driving it, you have ownership and you're trying to make it work, then it's unhealthy. It's not going to work. So there are implications for offering free coaching in my view. So that's reason number one, ownership. Reason number two, time. Busy people who need coaching tend to be looking for instant coffee. They want to be able to put it in a cup, pour in the hot water and get the results they're looking for, the instant hit. Now clients need to know that it requires time, it requires regular time. They actually have to invest time to make things happen, not just in the coaching session but going away from coaching, and it also takes longer to really make changes stick than people tend to assume. I'll come back to that one with my ideal model of engagement. Reason number three is that people find it more difficult than they expected. Sometimes coaching can be simple. We can really be focusing right down into one specific area, but it's not easy. It's not easy to implement and carry through and understand and change practices, get out of comfort zones. So sometimes when the going gets hard, clients parachute out. Reason number four is distractions. Now, busy people in busy organizations, you can pretty much anticipate that sooner or later, for good reasons or bad, that things are going to get crazy in the organization. That, you know, sometimes they get a huge volume of orders, a massive surge of work coming in, and it's a bit of a crisis, but for very good reasons. Other times there may be a reorganization, a restructure, some kind of negative crisis, and the wheels are going to come off the bus temporarily, but this needs to be anticipated from the outset, that this may well happen at some point during our engagement. What are we going to do about this? This is going to be the strategy. And incidentally, you might want to stress at this stage that actually coaching can be the most useful thing that people can maintain during periods of crisis when things are going crazy, that it really helps to keep their feet on the ground. Reason number five is reward and outcomes. Again, many clients are looking, and their organizations are looking for a quick hit in terms of the bottom line. The Hewitt Associates have done some research which shows that leadership development does indeed lead to significant long-term revenue and profit growth in companies, but nothing in the short term. There is not a short-term result. This is not a quick hit. If people are looking for instant rewards, instant satisfaction, instant bottom line results, they're being unrealistic. So that needs to be stressed at the outset, that there will be long-term success if they persevere, but not to be expecting quick results in the bottom line. The sixth reason why clients fall by the wayside is the longer term thing. It's related to the last one. It's maintenance. Making change stick takes perseverance. People often make the mistake that if they focus on something, they come up with a really good strategy, they try it works, they think that's it, you know, I don't need coaching anymore. The reality is that when they, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months later, however long it takes, sooner or later, they're going to get stressed out and they're going to go back to their default behaviours, which is the way they used to do it before. Things will either drift back there or they'll go back there suddenly. And then they wonder why they got the coaching. Maybe it wasn't that valuable in the first place. So clients need to understand that maintaining change is one of the key reasons why they need a coach. So these 6 reasons are reasons why clients fall by the wayside. You need to understand that these are all likely to happen with busy people at some point in the relationship. You need to discuss it at the outset with them so that they are heads up, you are heads up. They know it's a normal part of the coaching process. So with this one, over to you. So one of the reasons that we don't get terms of engagement right is that coaches, out of fear, fail to address the issue at all. I've also shared with you 6 reasons why clients tend to fall by the wayside that it's really healthy to talk about in advance. Now, the third thing that we tend to overlook and not really be very good at is the issue of coachability. Is our client coachable? Incidentally, this is a two-way thing, and let me explain. Again, drawing on Marshall Goldsmith's experience, the 3 things that are expected up front of clients are, first of all, courage, secondly, humility, and third, discipline. Courage, because it takes courage to change. It takes courage to get out of your comfort zone. Often successful people have got stuck with ways of doing things that aren't the best way of doing things, that aren't healthy, but they are attached to them because they've become successful. But what got them there won't necessarily get them beyond. That it takes courage to say, I don't know everything, I don't do everything in the best possible way, and to, put your hand up and say, I can improve, I can change, and become even better. Why humility? Well, humility because we need to accept as clients that we need to admit to our peers, to our direct reports, to our bosses that we're not the finished article, that we're a work in progress, that we need their help, we need their feedback and suggestions feed forward to actually improve and develop. So humility and just accepting and being honest and accountable that we don't do everything that we set out to do. We don't do everything in the way that we set out to do. And discipline, clearly, because we need to stick to things. We need to expect our clients to have the discipline to carry through their intentions, that what they say they will do, that they stick to meetings by and large, to our sessions, that they stick to the schedule, the process, and they have the discipline to follow through in different ways. But I said at the outset that this is a mutual thing, because I think that clients should also expect these 3 things of us coaches. We need the courage to speak our mind. We need the courage to point out things that the client may not have observed or been aware of in themselves. And that's not always an easy thing to do. But we need to have the courage to say what we see, what we think, to share those ideas, but with the humility of not assuming that we're right, or we have the whole picture, or we have the whole answer. And we also particularly need discipline. We need to manage the process. We need to keep on top of that with the client. We need to keep it's a two-way thing here. We have as much responsibility to be reminding our client of what they've intended, what the schedule is, when we're carrying things through, what happens next, what happens after that. So courage, humility, and discipline should, in my view, be part of the terms of engagement, a two-way agreement, a two-way contract between coach and client in terms of what we expect of each other. You may think of other things, but I think these 3 are particularly useful and powerful. Hope that's useful. Over to you. Now let's look at confidentiality. I have heard coaches over the years, time after time, just making the glib statement, of course, everything is 100% confidential. I'm sorry, coaches, that is bullshit, and let me explain why. First of all, we are not protected by the law. There's a legality. We are not like the client's lawyer or maybe their doctor. There is no legal protection for coaches. So if your client is disclosing some illegal acts to you, then you cannot guarantee confidentiality. Another issue here is, I mean, maybe it's not the client who's paying, maybe it's the client's organization that are paying for the coaching. So what kind of ownership do they have? Do they not have some kind of right to find out parts of what's being discussed and whether there's any progress being made? And what about when the client tells everybody they're getting coached by Hugh Todd, and one of these people gets in touch with me and says, can you give a testimonial? Would you recommend this person or their business? If it's 100% confidentiality, then I'm not able to say anything. So there are a number of issues that we need to recognize, that we cannot just say everything is 100% confidential. We do need to talk about this and the limits of confidentiality before we get into any real conversations. So my suggestion would be to say it's confidential within the limits of the law. It's as agreed and defined by your boss if you have one. But above all, I'd be encouraging my client to be open and transparent. Instead of keeping coaching as something secret that's done behind closed doors, the more open my client is with their colleagues, with their boss, with the direct reports, the people that are in their team and working for them, then there is no need for confidentiality anyway, because if they've got the courage, humility and discipline, they're going to be saying, here's what I'm working on right now, here's what I'm trying to improve, here's what I'm trying to do better as I go forward or differently. And they're actually looking for suggestions and feedback from people going forward. So where's the need for confidentiality? There is none. Now, sure, if it gets into a private away from work area, some sort of discussion, then confidentiality, that's the sort of thing that we would not discuss. But again, check every time is my recommendation. There are limits to confidentiality at the outset. If something's coming up in a conversation that you're not sure about the confidentiality or the status of the confidentiality with it, then just take a pause and say, can I just check about confidentiality with this one? Where is this going? Where is it not going? And anyway, I'm not your only coach. You're surrounded by coaches. With this one, confidentiality, no bullshit. Be clear about the limitations and discuss it. Discuss it often if need be. Over to you. Now, one more thing that we need to talk about with our client before we really move on to nailing down the engagement is to clarify the purpose. It's very easy to assume because somebody's asking for coaching that there's a need and we should just get going, get started. But believe me, that leads to all sorts of problems later on with misunderstandings, misunderstood expectations, and so on. It's really very, very important and healthy to get some clarity of purpose. What's the coaching really for? And ideally, I think it's really good to narrow the focus of the coaching down. There may be all sorts of things people may be wanting just to develop as a leader or develop as a whole person, which is all well and good. But we've got to start with, we've got to boil it down to the key triggers that will help them to make those changes, or the blocks, the things that are stopping them from making those changes, and to get some clarity on the ideal outcome. You know, if they could learn how to handle conflict in a much more constructive way, for example, then what would be the outcome? What would be the benefit of doing that? What would be the payback when they've made those changes? So how do we do this? Well, first of all, we've got to ask the client straight up, you know, what is it that you really want to work on or get out of this? They may not be very clear. So And previously I've talked about doing a values exercise, working out what's important to the client. It may be an aspect of their career they want to look at. If they're trying to develop as a leader, which is my specialist area, then there's a 360, getting their own analysis, getting some feedback from all of those around them on how they're doing, but what they ideally what they can work on. It may be a strength that needs to be developed and capitalized on better. It may be that they need to change something if they're going to become more successful. Ideally, you want to set up a real stretch goal or stretch outcome so that your client is showing that they need to get out of their comfort zone to make the change. So have a discussion. Clarify the purpose. What is this really for? What is it you really, really want to get from this whole process? Nail it down, define it at the outset. And if you can, try to put a dollar value on that. Try and work out what that's worth in retention, in the bottom line for the organization, in the value in the relationships, in bringing out the best in other people, whatever it may be. What actually is the value that they're looking for from all of this? It's hard for us to define this, but if you can get the client in that mindset of really being disciplined about thinking about the outcomes, what the real purpose they're looking for and what that's worth to them, it's good to have that conversation at the outset. Record it and come back to it regularly. I'll say more about that in the next little clip on tracking return on investment. Believe me, it's not a sexy subject, but it is so crucial in the coaching engagement. So once more, over to you. What is the return on investment that clients can expect from coaching, from the whole coaching process? Well, coaches, this is something that we tend to avoid because it's too difficult. We think at the outset we don't really know what the benefit's going to be. It's a vague kind of process. Well, it shouldn't be. Let me share some thoughts, some ideas with you to make it achievable, to make this practical, but above all, let me stress how important it is to try to work at these things in the very early stages with your client. There needs to be a return on investment, and there needs to be evidence of that. And it's one of the reasons why the field of coaching has such a patchy reputation. Often, even when it's been successful, people can't really remember where they started or what the purpose was. They just think it was, kind of nice and quite a good thing. So let's have a look at this. What I'm going to draw on first of all is going back a while, the origins of the model for return on investment in training. The Kirkpatrick model has 4 levels. The first of these is happy sheets. We've all been at training days where we've been asked to fill in a happy sheet at the end of the day, saying, did we like the trainer? Did we like the topic? Was it nice to be here? And give that kind of quick feedback. Well, coaching should be much more than that. Level 2 in the Kirkpatrick model is about actual learning. Did the participants actually learn anything as a result of what they were doing? And sure, we hope people get new insights, get new learning from coaching. I guess teaching is based on, it's evaluated primarily based on level 2, actual learning, where pupils and students are expected to demonstrate in some way probably at the end of a year through tests and exams that they have in fact learned something in the quality of the learning that they've had. However, Kirkpatrick's level 3 is where coaching really begins to come into its own, because it asks the question, has there been appropriate behaviour change? In other words, when the person has had their coaching session, they've been in the training workshop, and they've gone back to work and back to their lives, has it actually had an impact in the way they behave when they go there? So that needs to be tracked after the event. much more useful to track that in terms of coaching. But level 4 is perhaps even more important, is what is the wider long-term impact of the change on the business, on the organization, the family that the client goes back into. In other words, is there a cascade effect? Have things moved on? Particularly in this fourth area, it's a lot of the reasoning behind the ideal model of engagement that I'm going to share with you in another short video in this series. But the questions here are the behavioural changes sustainable? Changing them once and trying it out once or twice, experimenting with a new way of doing things, does not mean that becomes the way that person does things as their default method in the future. It doesn't mean that the organization uses that as their default behavior, the way we do things around here in the future. So the question of sustainability is also part of the reason why a coaching engagement ought to be longer term than you're probably thinking. And this question of the cascade effect. Now, let me give the example of Alan Mulally, who is the CEO of the Ford Motor Company from just after the global financial crisis, when Ford was losing, I believe, $17 billion a year. Now, Alan Mulally was getting coached by Marshall Goldsmith. And I've heard him talk about this whole experience. What particularly impressed me was that he learned about coaching methods, the methodology and the principles behind coaching from what he was experiencing from Marshall Goldsmith, and he applied that in his work with his own leadership team within his own company. And that's a big driver for the massive change and the great success that Alan Mulally had with Ford going forward. It's one of the very few companies that did not have massive financial issues and long-term issues as a result of what he was doing. So the Kirkpatrick model is on return on investment leads you into questioning the long-term impact and value. Now, for myself, I use a simple but difficult yardstick. I'm asking myself at the outset, do I believe that my client will get at least a 500% return on their investment? Now, that's 5 times what they're going to be paying me over the course of the assignment. And I have to go looking for the evidence of that. I have to be trying to turn, it sounds mercenary, but it is really important to have some kind of measure. What is the impact? You know, is this organization going to be able to retain more staff? There's less turnover, they have higher quality, there's less sickness, there's the leader goes on to greater success, gets promotion, gets a bigger bonus, whatever it might be. And it's good to involve my client in these conversations at the outset. So what is the potential? Where might it be? What can we expect? And I'm looking for clients where I feel that I can make a difference of at least 500% in terms of the investment for them. So what's really in it for the client? What's really in it for their organization? What's really in it for anyone else? Now, the Marshall Goldsmith model, I think, is a really good one here. It starts out with a 360 assessment, which involves the boss, if there is one, peers, direct reports, and the whole process of identifying the strengths and areas for development of a leader. But the key thing here is to boil it down specifically to the 1 or 2 behaviours that will be the triggers for bringing about greater success further down the track. Or it might be behaviours that are blocking that greater success, and to focus on those 2 areas. But then it's followed up with mini surveys with agreed stakeholders, the people that have a stake in what that leader is doing and how they're working, their direct reports, their peers, their boss, agreed at the outset. And on a regular basis, they'll be asked questions like, have you perceived a change? Do you think that the leader is actually trying to make these changes? And what kind of suggestions do you have going forward for how they might improve in these 2 areas in the next month, say? And then that's followed up with quarterly, more in-depth surveys to track and look for evidence of progress from the first 360. Now, this sounds time-consuming, but with an organisation like Marshall Goldsmiths, then a lot of this, well, it's not entirely automated, it's semi-automated. The initial 360 is not just an online or paper exercise. I actually will talk to the respondents and interview them one-on-one to get the stories to go with the objective data. And this is the kind of conversation that continues going forward. The client has to have conversations with those stakeholders to say, you know, this is what I'm working on. Is there a return? Is this making a difference? By becoming a leader, a better leader, is this helping you in your work? Those kind of conversations carry on. It's not just the return on investment from this simple coach-client relationship that we're looking at here. So that's best practice in a kind of complex way. But if you're just simply doing one-on-one coaching, you don't have the resources of an organization like that behind you, then at the very minimum, you've got to be talking to your client at the outset about what they are really looking for from the process and what that means to them. And every time you meet, I suggest that you finish up with the question, what has been most valuable from today's session? And follow that up with, and what has been most valuable in the coaching process so far? And how do you know that that's valuable? What does that mean to you? What does that mean to your organization, to the people around about you? Keep asking your client for that information on a regular basis, because they should be just as focused on looking for a return from their investment of time and money as you are. Return on investment, not an easy area. Please experiment with it. Please pay attention to it. Please have a go and stick to it through the course of your coaching engagements. Over to you. Finally, you might well say, on engagement, on client coach contracts engagements, what do I think is the best practice? What about engagement models? Well, what I want to share with you today is what I think of as best practice. My specialist field, if you like, is leadership development. Now, leadership is not something that people become great at overnight. And contrary to popular belief, leaders are not born. Leaders have a lot of skills to learn over a long period of time, so it's certainly not an area where you can expect a quick fix. So in my area, typically an engagement should be 12 months with a minimum of 6 months. Now, 12 months is probably what it takes to carry through the kind of changes and the depth of changes, the sustainability of those changes that's required. Now, sure, there's going to be a lot of spin-offs from the core areas that we're focusing on. There's going to be a lot of other things that crop up during the time. There's going to be a lot of other coaching that I can give. But if we really want to make the changes and make them stick in those two areas with somebody who's an experienced professional, it's going to take some time. Well, that's the length of engagement that I think is ideal. Secondly, what about the question of providing a guarantee or some kind of warranty that there will be outcomes? Well, again, best practice is to say yes. In the areas that we agree, there need to be outcomes. Otherwise, one of us or both of us haven't done our job. We've not played our part. I think best practice, well, if you can afford it, is to defer your fees right to the end. Some wealthy and very successful coaches do that. But I think for most of us, rather than doing a monthly retainer, I think best practice is to work out, say for a 12-month contract, what the fee is for the year, and get 50% upfront before you start. there is this question of ownership by the client, by their organization and their commitment, and they're buying their 50% buys whatever may be needed, the 360-degree feedback, your time initially, your time all the way through. And the other 50% to be on completion, right at the end of the engagement, if there is evidence of progress, of achievement being carried forward. Now that guarantee in best practice is over a 12-month period. If they don't agree to a 12-month, then I wouldn't give the guarantee at the end. However, you can do a sliding scale. You know, if we terminate before the end of 12 months, then you know we would look at this much over that period. So first of all, the length of the engagement. Secondly, the question of guaranteeing results and outcomes. The third thing is, I suppose, the byproduct of that is, what if it's just not working? What if the client isn't pulling their weight, their heart's not in it, their circumstances change, they leave the organization, they fall ill, you fall ill, things kind of fall apart? Well, then you need to have built into your engagement the return on investment tracking. You need to be have some kind of means for showing early on that things aren't working. Work on an appropriate strategy. But if it's not working, then the client, the coach, should walk away. If the coach is not doing the business, then the client should have the opportunity to walk away. So have an escape clause in the engagement for either party. Include that in the terms of engagement. But also, I would build into, I think it's best practice to build into the terms of the engagement the three issues of coachability that I discussed earlier: courage, humility, and discipline. These need to be being shown consistently all the way through by both parties. And if they're not, the coaching is not going to work. And you need to either change things, or you need to challenge it. You need to come up with a new strategy, or either party, you need to walk away and terminate the engagement. The downside, the other side of this is I've seen coaches, and I've been guilty of it myself in the past, is being too optimistic, of hanging on too long, and when it's really not working, and just kind of hoping or wishing that something will change, or taking the client's word for it that they're actually going to do better or differently next month, and doing that time and time again. You end up with a lousy testimonial. You end up without getting results. You end up wasting your time, and you probably won't get the second 50% of your engagement fee either, and so you've wasted the best part of a year getting nothing for it. So I think be disciplined. Get it right at the outset, and then you can challenge your client at any stage when they're not fulfilling their part of the engagement. Coming to the end of this series now, you may be wondering where I am, the backdrop here. I'm in Krakow in Poland, a beautiful historic city. It's had a tough past, it's had a very wealthy past. It's a very interesting, very beautiful place to visit. We're looking at the castle right in the city centre, right behind us. I hope it hasn't been too distracting. Anyway, the coaching engagement, that's your job. Over to you.